All right. So I think let's start. People would still be joining in, but I think they'll jump in and we'll create the construct until then. And before we start, of course, a very happy New Year to all of you. Um, you know, this topic is rather quite interesting to start the year with, uh, specifically when 2022 has been a great year for enterprise blockchain, and yet we have seen some cases where it disappointed us as well. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us as well. We're just starting up, and we hope more people would be joining in. So yes, in this year has been quite tough on enterprise blockchain, but yes, of course, we would talk about our opinions and the perspective and the gauge using which we can actually see what potential it still has and what kind of turnarounds are happening, what kind of re-strategizing on things are happening, and how enterprises are looking at blockchain. But of course, we'll focus a lot upon what has happened, why it happened, specifically on adoption, its challenges, some classic case of failures, and some real examples, some of the most famous ones. In fact, I cannot think of more, considering some of those examples are so close and so real that we were hearing them doing a lot great a few months ago, and then just so recent the news came up that they're not going to continue. So yes, the year has been full of excitement in the enterprise space, disappointments, real learnings, and whatnot. So I think let's start with how it is today, what is happening, where do we see the enterprise space, and what is actually in the market. So of course, this is all talk. Potential has been there. We have been witnessing it, and the direction it is going is still very, very positive. It's not just a few cases, a few wrongs, a few reasons we need to look down upon, but there is a lot which has been in the right direction, and I think that's what matters. And ultimately, in last sessions we have discussed about how it's not just the technology which is to blame on. We'll discuss it in length during our conversation today. But yes, just to again polish the context here and there a bit more, it's not about the technology which was at foul. It was more on business decisions as well, and a lot of business aspects, specifically for the enterprise segment. Now, what is happening today? If you see, I've tried creating a kind of a distribution of reality in the enterprise segment, because a lot of people usually ask or are very curious to know what is happening, what are the reality pilots, POC, real implementations, and everything in one way. But of course, these numbers are also, I would say, not real, because they're changing very, very fast. So there's no one day you could say that this is what it is. But yeah, if you would see, we got like about 12% active blockchain implementations in play as of today. And in fact, some of the Deloitte studies pointed out pretty well. These studies are done pretty much late in 2022, so we can in some way say that they are the conclusion of whatever has happened. Even if happened, we still see that about like 60% of CTOs, CIOs across the globe are having one positive implementation within their organizations using blockchain as of today. So this data is about the enterprise segment. Now 17% pilots and proof of concepts are underway or happening. 8% are pilot projects, so projects which are kind of matured enough from the simulated data, which is about POC, and now reaching at a point where they can actually play with real world data and then see the outcomes. And then about like 26% projects in a lot of enterprises, a lot of industry domains and segments are under are being shaped as of today. They're being discussed, they're being thought upon, they're being brainstormed around, and they're being planned. And about 30% of the enterprises still are not using blockchain. Not a problem, because blockchain is not meant for everything. So of course we do not think or should not think that it should be just applied into every XYZ and Tom, Dick, and Harry kind of a case here and there. And then, of course, 3% enterprises are still unsure, even though they have a potential. There are either some strategic risks they are looking at, or maybe the market risk they are looking at, and they're not, they're being a little hesitant or unsure about how to step in. We talked about the risks a lot in our episode 4, and as we talk about the episodes, this is the 5th episode of our series, the Enterprise Blockchain series, and there have been 4 episodes before it, and we have got 2 more to go. So in this one, we are specifically talking about the adoption failures, the challenges, why it happens, what we need to be more careful about, and then how we can mitigate the challenge. In the first, we talk about the cost of ownership of doing a blockchain solution. Then we further talked about the architectures, the design strategies and principles, standards, compliances. Then we talked about performance, security, and then we talked about the risks as well in the 4th series chapter. And then today we are here talking about the adoption, failure, and challenges. Now let's move on a little further and see what common mistakes are. So when we say common mistakes, we usually talk about what comes into our mind first. And we are not individuals developing something. We are people who've been into business for quite some time. I'm including you all guys as well. We have seen ups and downs. We've seen a lot of things go here and there, and we have seen at most, maybe at least once in our lifetime, business lifetime, a new technology come into existence and then adopted. Be it the cloud, and even before the cloud, some folks are around us, maybe even beyond the cloud era, the mainframe era. Yeah, Dr. Vinod, yes, I will share the presentation of 3 and 4 as well. I'll try to put the link down in the chat. If I'll ask Paras if he's still on, I would request him if we can put the link in the chat and answer this slide. So yeah, we are pretty mature folks as a group together here, and some of us might have seen the era beyond the or before the clouds, the mainframe era as well. So every time a new technology comes in, there is something which happens, and that something is pretty obvious to the industry. It's a classical situation that some people get too excited about it, and then we start looking at all under one lens that it might solve everything, but that's not the case. And I think blockchain is not exception to that as well. Blockchain can do a lot. It has got tremendous potential, but then, like we discussed in the 3rd series chapter, the 2nd series chapter, that how do you decide if a use case is fit for a blockchain or not, is equally important in actually not knowing it only, but not doing it then once you know that it's not a fit. So a lot of adoption challenges were not about knowing the technology, but then they kind of manifested in failures because it was done wrong, or it was not fit for the purpose. So yes, in some cases it was the wrong fit. In some cases, the understanding on how to fit it was not right. So ultimately, it was the nuance of it being a new technology, nascent technology, not enough knowledge, expertise around, not enough execution capabilities around, made those scenarios happen. In this session today, you would feel that we are repeating a lot of things quite again and again. That would happen because this is a real scenario here, and this happens in every other use case, in every other enterprise in different ways. So we might go about the same topic in different ways again and again. Second is the misunderstanding of the blockchain's economics. Now, what economics is, usually enterprise, they look at economics in a very flat manner. They say like, oh, the ROI. So if you take an example of supply chain system, they would say, oh, initially, if we were learning the legacy systems, our outcome was like these many units a month in production, or maybe some other parametric. Now, when they apply blockchain to it, there are nuances in some different ways. So if the supply chain slows down, the manufacturing slows down in one way or other, that is the problem. And again, it ends up creating long-term problems in terms of how do you create benefits, monetary benefits out of such a system? How do you grow your company at a specific rate, or enterprise, growth at a specific rate when it comes down to that it slows down on certain things? So the right understanding of how it fits, how it generates the ROI, is also fundamental to have. And this is again one of the common mistakes which is being done in the enterprise use cases, where people not knowing the right structure of it applies it to the use cases. And like I gave the example of supply chain, in the end, even if the technology is not wrong, but applied wrong, would end up creating long-term issues for the enterprises. And it's not just that the one issue which happens with one enterprise. As soon as the news goes out, as soon as those big publications starts getting published, then you and I, we start having fears of we start getting frightened about that, should we try or not? So it's like a domino effect in the enterprise space. If something goes wrong with one brand, the other brand, then other 10 brands, all the associated ones, they start getting affected by this domino nature. Then lack of proper governance structure. So it's pretty much aligned to the discussions we had in the risk webinar. So if there are strategic risks, what those risks would be. For example, I'm a supply chain. I'm trying to set up a supply chain ecosystem on a blockchain based consortium, but then I may be the manufacturer, but then there are suppliers, distributors. They may not be strategically aligned in terms of how do they want to participate, when do they want to participate. And then when we form this consortium, we do not define it right beyond just aligning them right strategically, that what sort of roles they will have to play or will be playing, what sort of participation in terms of permissioning they'll be having, what they will control, own, and will be able to moderate. So decentralizing the governance is also important in terms of blockchain-based consortium. And then not just this, but the incentive mechanism, because like I said, they may not be strategically aligned to participate in the consortium today, but there could be reasons to it. It may be if there is if there is some benefit for them right away or not. Maybe it's not direct but indirect, but it has to be clearly put out in light. And if there is if there is some kind of benefit which is beyond process and workflow, it has to be some sort of incentive which we should be driving towards them. Or else this model actually fails, where you bring in multiple parties without defining who gets what, gains on what, and becomes better on what. And then regulatory concerns, needless to talk about. We all know what it means. And I think this is one of the most prominent challenge, because of which India is shying away from this technology, comparing what is happening in the North American markets, the European markets. So this is one reason why we always play the catch-up game. We always become more skeptical about technology. But then regulators or regulations not being there makes us more more rigid in our thought, in the sense that what if I invest this much, and if tomorrow a new regulation comes which says that, oh, my solution does not exist anymore or cannot exist anymore, I would end up in a lot of crisis, a lot of questions and answers, this and that and all and whatnot. So this is one of the important points here, comparing the others. Among the common mistakes, the fundamental ones. Now let's expand this a little further in terms of, if we classify the failures or the adoption challenges, which enterprise, when you talk to them, and there have been surveys where they have been talked about that what made them not do it. So of course 30% of them were because they were not sure of the implementation, the strategy, the idea, the approach, the execution, or you can say they were not even able to see if it would give them any fit or benefit or some betterment. Then 30%, which is a large chunk, of them were like, because of the regulatory issues, pretty common in the enterprise segment, because the day you start enterprise, even before the E comes, you start saying the C of the compliance, and it's a real point. And then security threat, which is again another reason, a prominent reason among, so I only created 3 categories because most of the cases, they fall into these 3 categories in terms of why they haven't adopted, done it, or have stopped or shut down their cases. So security being the third major category. Now, if we further distribute the challenges, if we try to zero down on what it is in practical in terms of organizational, economical, and technological categories, and we talk about them, we'll talk about them in order. So we'll start with organizational. This is what you actually have in this case. So in terms of organizational or corporate typical enterprise structures, we really struggle with internal stakeholder buy-in. Now, this problem is so real that until 2021 or 2, when you have seen that each enterprise now today has got their own innovation department, digital transformation department, specifically budgeted and focused to bring in blockchain. Yet still, a lot of functional divisions, they don't get to the point pretty easily, and it takes a lot of presentations, a lot of brainstorming sessions, a lot of internal pitching in and all, and a lot of convincing, budget allocation, a lot of fight. It still happens, and it's not just happening in India. This is happening beyond India as well. So we're talking on the global scale. We're not limiting it to geography in any sense. So internal stakeholder buy-in is a problem, and it's a real problem. And then network governance. Again, we talked about governance, its importance. So when multiple organizations, they come and play together, it's very vital to define the right governance. But people say, oh, blockchain is driven by smart contracts. That's the manual intervention-free logic of doing business and workflow and operations. But then if you practically see it, the consortium forms before the code happens. What I'm saying here is that the stakeholder agreements, the understanding how the workflow would be, what operations would be performed, who will gain what access and all, those things are defined and shaped even before they're coded. So technology is about, making it operational by the execution, but not by the definition. And here, the challenge is the definition of the governance. And then the most obvious suspect, the usual suspect, adoption by the network participants. So the classic case of supply chain, you as a manufacturer would want to do it like full hard, but what happens if your distributor is not interested, the supplier is not interested, though it matters the most. Now, we have seen legacy 2.0 systems failing in terms of provenance, counterfeiting and all, and people coming up with, industry experts coming up with suggestions saying, oh, if you would apply blockchain, Web3, this would solve this and that and all. And Johnson & Johnson was a typical example in the Web 2.0 world where, questions about its service, the quality of the product came in and all, and they could not prove it. So it's not just the structure of the use case, the idea of the use case, the innovation around it, which helps, but the adoption by the participants who are in real, who are on ground working together to make a business workflow happen, must adopt it as well, equally as the initiator, because it's about the governance. So point 2 and 3, they're kind of pretty much correlated. And then regulation, fifth one, I think I will not talk much about it. Pretty obvious for organizations for obvious reasons. But lack of talent is another thing. Again, coming back to the same point which I stated a while ago, that until last 1 or 2 years, specifically the last year, the concentration of head of innovation, head of blockchain, global head of blockchain, digital transformation, these departments never existed, specifically around blockchain. Until last year or last 2 years, we haven't seen them much. But now the focus is there. So I'm saying that this is being solved, but not having those talented people around, not having those capable experts around, is one of the reasons either why we shy away from these technologies, or we actually are a little scared or skeptical or cynical about it. Even, I've heard, I'll not name, but I've heard, from some of my industry friends in States, that in their their enterprises, they're not even allowed to call names like DeFi and all, because God knows, after FTX and all, they're not taken in a good manner. So the cynical nature of how we see might be this bit as well. So lack of talent actually, it's inducive, and the lack of it creates a vicious cycle of going down the rabbit hole and not coming out ever. When it comes about a new technology, changing the system, transforming the strategies and business workflows for an enterprise. So it's a real problem. It's actually getting solved pretty fast, but comparing the number of developers which are available today, the experts who could actually create business solutions, transform them into it, are still not in ample amount. And that's one reason we're trying to do these sessions a lot nowadays, so that we can pass on that knowledge. We'll try to enable more and more people, try to include and involve as many as industry experts and experienced folks like you and us, so that this actually starts happening and we get over the challenge. Now comes the economical bit, and the first point is incentive for the participants. We discussed it up to some bits and bytes on the previous slide, and I think that's where we would start and probably conclude too. That there has to be a reason why one participant should be there, why one stakeholder should be there in a network. There has to be a reason to this. Now, that reason could be maybe better ROI. That reason could be that as a distributor, I'm getting some schemes to release my consignments, or some schemes, which promotional schemes, which helps me get more coupons and stuff and all. It could be as tiny as that, or it could be as grand as just simply turning the table upside down in terms of revenues, growth, potential of growth, or maybe the ROI, immediate or maybe long-term ROI as well. So incentive is must, whichever manner, direct, indirect it is. And then cost of new IT implementation and integration. Imagine if one enterprise, this is how enterprises usually function. They invest into systems for years. For example, if one organization is running SAP for years, and you someday would come in and tell them that, oh, okay, SAP won't do it for you because it's a system in silo. We must start creating things on blockchain. The investment would be simply into the bin. But then that is something which is not the case in most of the cases. That you have to just throw out the whole old system. You just have to better it, complement it with additional components or layers added using Web3 or blockchain. But still, it is cost expensive in some cases, in some senses, specifically when multiple stakeholders are there, multiple enterprises are there, and then there is no proper cost sharing is happening between them. For example, if one party is running all the nodes, and let's start simply using web and mobile apps, then the cost burden is on one party and it's not being properly shared. So it is also to be defined. It can be part of the governance. And the earlier bit which I talked about is related to lack of talent, where do we have to replace the old system or simply build on, around and about them? So it requires the right people to take the right decisions in terms of how the infrastructure, how the software element of it, how the process element of it. So it takes a lot of subject matter experts, technology experts, infra experts, and all sort of experts to come together and take the right decisions, so that we don't have the implications which we usually end up having, but having the right benefits. And summarizing it all, it's all about the ROI in the end for an enterprise. If it's not the ROI, I think we're not talking at all. And I know that, most of you folks are, working with large enterprises in one way or other, or are, consulting them one way or other. So, the importance of these three letters ROI. If you don't write it on the board as the first three letters, you're out of the door, because no solution exists which goes against the growth or does not have the potential to better something. Now let's come to the technological bit. I've been, devil's advocate myself a lot of time, where I kept on saying that, it's not the technology to blame. It's a lot of other stuff as well. But that does not mean that we don't question the technology at all and don't talk about it at all. So we just do not have to brush these topics under the carpet when it comes to technology. So we'll have to be very carefully looking at these aspects as well. And again, this is why it goes back to the lack of talent aspect. We must have the right people to take right decisions, not on the business side, not on the process side, not on the subject side, but also on the technology side. So we must know what protocols are there, what are the mature ones, what are the right ones, so that, for example, if I build on Hyperledger Sawtooth, I'm not criticizing Hyperledger Sawtooth here. I'm not saying that's a Ghan protocol. But that's not a protocol which you would want to build upon, because it does not have a very high community support. The newer versions are not coming very actively. You might end up in bugs which are not being fixed for months and months and months of time. When that happens, it's not the business, the process, the operation, the execution, the ROI, the cost, the integration, the incentive, the governance, which is at fail or fault. It is the maturity of the protocol. So if the software cannot function, you cannot run the governance in the air. So the maturity of the protocol or the technology which is being picked is really important. That's why most people have gone for IBM-backed protocols, which IBM started and kept on giving their team support in the open source community a lot. Hyperledger Fabric for that name, and several many others. Like Hyperledger Besu. So most under the Hyperledger umbrella in the enterprise segment, the Linux Foundation umbrella, because that's how we have seen last 30 years of software industry or open source industry evolving, the Linux Foundation itself. So we trust that. So whenever something happens under that umbrella, we trust that. So maturity, of course, it has got so many names, but it must be there. Second is performance. I may pick something which may give me a lot of advancement, but does not, it reduces for example, the production line. Now, it may reduce the production line because of, the capability of not having enough transaction throughput, or maybe not having, or not allowing me having, multiple organizations or stakeholders or participants on board. So wherever the limitations are, these are performance limitations, and we have to be very critical about them while deciding or choosing the technology. So we might fail if we choose the wrong technology or wrong protocol. If you narrow it down in terms of blockchain implementations, you mostly are talking about when you're talking about choosing a technology, you mostly are talking about choosing a blockchain protocol in the end, because we are all well versed with Web2 world. And then third is interoperability. Now, do I need it? That depends upon the use case I'm building. So, for example, if I'm building a trade finance use case out of which there are certain requirements which indicates that someday I would have to. I'm building on Hyperledger Fabric, but someday I would have to interact with the network where identities rely, and that's a different type of protocol which that network is running upon, and then another network where the supply chain is, and that is built upon, or a trade finance one that is built upon R3 Coda. So of course decisions are about if I require it or not, but then if I require it, then whatever I'm building upon and the kind of protocols I would have to engage, or other use cases or enterprise ecosystem implementations where I'll have to engage, are they the ones where interoperability would be a need and my protocol will fulfill or not, or my choice of technology stack would fulfill or not. And then privacy. So again, first segment is important, that how is privacy architected in my use case or for my use case, but then does my protocol allow it? For example, if I pick like Ethereum and I require a lot of privacy, I'm like setting it up for a failure, because I know in Ethereum everything is going to be a public ledger someday. Not someday, like from day zero itself. So it's setting it up for a failure if I choose that protocol or that technology stack to build my use case, while the privacy is one of the most important aspects of the whole structure or architecture. And then manageability. This is something which we talked a lot about in the first session or the first chapter, where we re-emphasized that it's not just about building a blockchain solution, it's about running it well and wide and up to the mark it is required to be run. And this means a lot of monitoring, infrastructure level components, scalability components of not the protocol, but the process of scaling as well. So this is where you have to be very careful of how do you maintain your networks, run them, scale them, add more nodes, add more configurations and features and all, continuously upgrade your smart contract. So that all piece should be sorted, and we prefer that it is the automation which is to be there to help out on these, rather than building a team, because usually if you build a very large team around it, you would increase the cost, damage the ROI, fail the use case. And this is 50 times more complex comparing the standard Web 2.0 or legacy systems which we have seen before Web 3 or blockchain. So this must not be taken lightly at all. I wanted to put it in red and bold and all, but I think we had a whole session, episode 1 on this. So I thought I'll just simply refer it there and then pass it on and then move to the next point, which is the ease of integration. So, talking about the cost of new IT implementations and relating it there, that we are not going to replace the systems, because if we do that, we're going to waste a lot of money, waste of a lot of time of a lot of people who have spent years of building enterprise systems which run today. So we're going to simply integrate where we can integrate, couple where we can be more cohesive and deliver the value, add. So the ease of integration is one aspect where we should be very careful about that. It's not a new solution which is to come in existence. It has to be very sensitive in the sense that if it requires talking to the legacy technology or the other systems, it should be easy. Because if it is not easy, we might fall in problems which are at times impossible to solve. I'll give you some analogy here. For example, if I can make an operating system, but then it is pretty tough for people to integrate with and deploy their applications upon, this operating system will be of no use to nobody. So supportability, of course, is a thing in the sense that technology should allow enough layers or methods or basis or tools or maybe teams or talent to support it pretty well. It's about not just running it once, it's about running it for quite a while and make it happen. So but this is, I would say this slide is pretty much the juice of the whole session, because it gives us, one slide and multi-perspective, 360 perspective of everything which is a challenge, and because of which not just we think a use case would fail, but a lot of use cases which has failed in the past has failed. Now, if we further walk down the path of the same thing, implementation cost again. So now we are going to be talking more from the perspective of the failure rather than adoption. So we're trying to do a conversation shift here in our session today, from adoption challenge to the reason of failure. So we are going to be reflavoring the same points, right? Like I said, we'll be talking about the same points again and again quite many times today, but we'll be talking in different perspectives. So now the perspective would be more on the reason for failure rather than reason for or adoption challenge. So blockchain implementation cost is one reason of failure, because it's very fundamental. If I tell you today that because of some reason the potato you've been buying until yesterday or until today at 20 rupees a kg are not going to be 20 at all, they're going to be 30. That's going to be an immediate hit onto your planning, financial planning, or whatever money you got in pocket in terms of and how you have planned to buy vegetables that day. And Um, then if and in the same way, when you implement such a technology and you start spinning up nodes and start setting up a network, invest a lot into bringing the ecosystem together, all the partners, driving the incentive mechanisms initially, that takes a lot of cost. In fact, taking from POC, pilot, and production, this journey itself may be a year long for an enterprise. And we have seen that in real cases. And here is a lot of cost, a lot of people, a lot of consulting, a lot of development, a lot of market outreach, GTM strategy, this and that and all and whatnot. And what if after that it won't happen? So you would, of course, invest a lot into it, but then the same investment would become the reason, considering that others will have to invest the same way, and you being the first party starting it, but others are not agreeing to continue with it. So the same cost, which is heavy, will become the reason for not making it happen further. And then scalability. So I could do a lab experiment where I can do payment transactions, but when a company like MasterCard want to replace their system with blockchain, they will have tons of questions to answer. And if in rush of attempting a new technology, at times if we build a use case and then try to push it into production, I'm saying push it into production, then the failure is inexorable. It's something which nobody can save us from, considering the reality would be entirely different from the lab environment or the pilot environment or the POC environment. Even though there are cases where a lot of work has been done in terms of trying to extrapolate, trying to project, trying to benchmark the solutions up to a mark, but still they were not able to scale it enough. Sometimes in terms of transaction throughputs, number of executions a second, sometimes in terms of number of organizations participating in the governance or the permissioning of the whole system. So yes, it is difficult to scale if not done right, and if not scaled properly, is a potential reason of failure. In fact, it fails, and it just fails. Security is not a reason which would fail a use case, considering the points which we have discussed, or we can say in the same manner, like we've discussed for the points of cost and scaling and all. But then security is a thing which can fail it in just one go. Even after going into production successfully and giving you the right ROI and all, one spam, one scam, one malware, it would ruin it all. So, and it may be a leak of the smart contract, a wrong implementation, a vulnerability, whatever, if the audits are not done properly and all. So this aspect is like, it's immediate death. If even though your use case is functioning pretty good, giving all the aspects right, if security is unchecked, it's immediate death. And then criminal activity, it's of course it's not a direct threat, but it's a perception, a perspective. It's a psychological element, I would say, which gets created in the organizations. Thinking that blockchain is notorious, it's being used in a lot of criminal activities. My system would be prone to them, or not would be not seen as repeated if I use the same technology and all. So this reason is, I think it's a washout reason. It's not, it's more about the awareness, the education, the understanding, the get about of it thing. So I think it's not a major problem of failure today. It might still happen in some countries where, like Mexico and all. I'm not saying that those countries are doing anything wrong, but still where AML solutions are not in place and all, money laundering, terror funding and stuff is happening, yes, still is being suppressed big time. Data privacy, again, sometimes the excess of data between a consortium participants may give them competitive edge. Sometimes will give them competitive conflicts as well. So it is dangerous and it might kill a use case. I'll just simply give you an example of an insurance banks consortium or insurance company consortium. if one company after the launch realizes that the other company is stealing up with their customers, because they also know who has got what kind of vehicle, when they got renewed, what many claims and all, because they're trying to put it all in one ledger in the name of re, uh, pacing it up and all and unifying the systems and all. Then they would simply do away with such a system and will not participate further, and will deteriorate in terms of global collaboration, and the use case would simply be done. So it's both. And then this is what we in a synonymous way or can say that is a lack of partnership, lack of collaboration. Now that may happen for several many reasons, including the data privacy one, but then strategic alignment could be another reason for the same. Insufficient blockchain literacy and transitioning difficulty. So insufficient blockchain literacy simply means that we don't know what has to be done with this technology, in which manner, and when is the right time, and which is the right way to go about it, what is the right architecture, what would be the right governance model, and every what and why and what and why and what and why and how is the literacy. But even if you figure it out, everything, then in an enterprise, applying a new technology takes a shift. It's a regime in itself in terms of how it is to be done. It affects a lot of people, a lot of business flows, and a lot of outcomes, a lot of inputs, a lot of executions, and it remodifies legacy structures, elements, components, softwares, people, process, and everything. So when that remodeling, re-architecting of possibilities happen within an organization, that's a difficult challenge, and sometimes some use cases fail at that itself, even though blockchain is a fit, even though there are potential ROIs available, even though stakeholders are ready to participate and all. But the process, the legacy systems are like so stereotyped in the sense that even this transformation may never happen. Even if attempted, might fail. Then you're not actually reaching the real solution. You are failing even before reaching to the point of attempting it. So transitioning difficulties are real. Upskilling the manpower, onboarding the customers on the newer platforms or in the newer way on the same platforms. So everything is quite a challenge. Starting with the user experience as well. And one of the examples is you don't want your users simply coming up on a new platform, just forgetting about their username and passwords and using keys. Gonna be complicated. I'm just saying that enterprise use cases are far from reaching that model. Regulatory environment, when they're unclear, they give space for a lot of implementation challenges, and the complexity of technology in itself creates a lot of challenges in terms of deciding and defining what is right, what is not, when it's to be done, when not, if it is not to be done, and if it is done this way, then what kind of nuances or outcome or challenges would happen. So regulatory environment is something which is missing, and governments are still functioning upon, and legal problems are still there, and when to engage, when to not engage in such a system is still questioned. Of course, a lot of clarity has come in, but still there is a long way to go there. Interoperability challenges are, of course, the world has not been talking about them a lot lately because they were busy building at least one solution on the chain. But then when they built one, they realized that it is not just them who need to function. It is a group of people who need to come along, or a group of solutions which needs to come along. And then that's how the whole business ecosystem would function, hence the interoperability challenge. But then there are not enough mature methods, protocols, ways. Even if you figure out the business side of it, the technology side of it is not properly structured. A lot of work is being done in the ecosystem as of now, but not as potentially applicable or exact as it is required to be today. Now, we're just going a step backward in terms of trying to visualize everything we just talked about and trying to map it, because what we talked about is a lot of challenges and reasons for failures. Now let's just look at how 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 it is to be when a blockchain solution is to be implemented. It is pretty simple. It's like 1 2 3 4 5 6 kind of a process. Identify a use case, create a POC with simulated data, choose a platform, choose the right consensus, build a system, an ecosystem, and then determine the rules of engagement and navigate uncertainty. But if it is that simple, we would not have seen failures or adoption challenges at all. But we are just talking about this now after those many slides or those conversations, because we're trying to put a picture and then fill colors into it, so that we are exactly aware that how how easy it is to plan an implementation, but how complicated at the same time it is to plan it right. Now, let's talk about some of the classical failures of the year 2022. I'll start with the Maersk and IBM one. TradeLens. TradeLens, it has been the benchmark of every conference where blockchain live implementations have been talked about, including the Hyperledger Global Forum very end of the year in September in Dublin. TradeLens, V.Trade, these are the use cases which the world has been talking about as as a proof of that. Look, blockchain is real, the benefits are real, and it's happening. But TradeLens is shutting down. V.Trade has also announced that it's stopping or failing to raise more capital fund to operate. So let's first talk about TradeLens. Why it failed? Because they could not gather collaboration, or I would say they were not able to bring in the collaboration from all the stakeholders. And more or less, Maersk and IBM were they ended up running it for quite a while and all, but without collaboration, it started drying up. And like we discussed, in some of the challenges and then reasons for failures, this is actually announced a shutdown last month itself in December. Of course, a big disappointment, but it was not because technology was to blame. It was proper structure in the governance system and the participation of stakeholders and collaboration, which could not happen. Now, V.Trade, if you talk about this, this is also one of the early adopters, I would say, and it has actually grown very rapidly, during last two three years, as as a trade finance platform, the de facto platform. But then, of course, they ran out of funds. They haven't figured out the cost aspect of running it and all, and incentive distribution, or maybe the cost sharing was not proper, and it failed big time. It is also announced pretty recently that it's going down. And then ASX, the Australian Securities Exchange, they declared that they're going to trash what they started in 2016, and they're trying to look out for other alternatives or other solutions which they believe would help them reach the reality rather than failing at it. These are some famous examples, some of the most recent ones I wanted to quote. So for a pause in between, if you're trying to build anything on blockchain, an enterprise use case, or architecting one or consulting one, or you're a developer, building one yourself, then you can maybe scan this QR. What you will get, a 3-month free subscription from Zeeve, where you can create enterprise protocols networks, and also our team would be available for you. That includes me for consulting or suggestions for free, in the sense at least a few hours a month to advise you, to answer your questions, to clear your queries if you sign up. So yeah, do scan the code, sign up, and connect with us if required. I'll just pause it here for a minute, and then we'll move on. Yeah, so I think you've already done the scanning. Um, I'll leave the slide open in the end as well. But now let's move on to the key questions. What you should be, or the enterprise should be asking before implementing blockchain. So this is the important bit. You do these 7 right before implementing, that the chances of you failing are rare. So you have to be, again, subject matter expertise is required for this, but then you must understand how it disrupts the business you are trying to implement blockchain for. And there are so many ifs and so many questions about how to do it. So I think you can go back and see those sessions where we talked about the fitment of blockchain, the episode 2 and 3 specifically. Then the purpose of business application, is that well understood? It kind of resonates the answer of the first question itself. So it's equally important. And then the third one is that, if the technology which we are using is resilient, scalable, and secure. We talked about this already. So I'm just, just reading through these questions because, they are just to be asked. And we already have discussed what needs to be done, what kind of, people would be required to do this. The impacts of blockchain technology on the market. In this case, we're talking about the market your business addresses. And then how does blockchain reduce cost or improve customer service? So yeah, the impact is the main concern of this question. It's not that you just have to focus on cost and customer service. Of course, these are the 2 primary drivers of any business. That's why, I have written this way, but you may, have more reasons and more impactful things as well. And then how it is to be governed, administered. It's the bottom line of your architecture, because if this is missing, it would fall like a stack of cards. And then how long-term, short-term are you planning? Is this going to, because this directly is proportional to the cost challenges. It is directly proportional to the V-Trade and Musk. They fell because they could not run it for enough time. They could not bring in enough collaboration for enough time. So you got to, plan it enough. And now, so those are the questions you must ask, and then kind of, structured approach you can take. We have taken a whole episode on this, designing blockchain, enterprise blockchain solutions and architectures and all. But I think this is a quick glimpse of, what needs to be in your head in terms of, approaching the challenges and then solving them. So objective assessment is necessary. Risk assessment included. The impact of it included. The potential business disruption included. And the solution of the use case included. And then, of course, as a second point, you can then focus upon identity, then prioritize the business use case with quantifiable outcomes. The measurement is key here. The right measurement of the use case is key here. And then, of course, data elements, network participants, those are required to be identified well in time and identified right. So this resonates, the governing structure itself, because in the enterprise use cases, if you're identifying the network participants, you also have to identify where they fit, what kind of governance structure they fit in, permissioning and level of access and all. And then incentive model should be well defined, and it should be aligned right. It should not be biased. It should not be very, very complex at the same time. So it should maximize the value of the whole ecosystem, not like for a few participants in some way or other. Maybe in some cases we have seen that people have or organizations starting the ecosystem or the consortiums are driving most incentive towards them. But I think that would be setting it up for a failure without saying it. Now, some of the best practices. How do you achieve wider adoption? So understanding the problem, the need, proper implementation, focus plus value focus. So user focus plus value focus is necessary, because ultimately the solution is going to serve somebody and it'll be driving some value out of it. So again, saying the same thing, but in a different way. And then make it simple, easy to use, easy to adopt. The whole solution itself. Familiarize yourself with the regulations of the industry, the domain, the segment you're building around. That is going to be critical. So yeah, this is pretty much it. And like I said, you can reach out to us, ask questions. If not today, then after the session, and then sign up on Zeeve. Reach out to our teams through LinkedIn, through Twitter, through Discord, through Telegram, or maybe through emails as well. And you would have all the support you would require to build enterprise solutions in the sense of infrastructure, architecting the infra right, building the node infrastructure, scaling it further, creating the consortiums. Yeah, and we are everywhere. So I think this is where I'll pause and open it for questions. I think this is the best session I've done ever, considering the timelines. We finished 2 minutes before the due time. So yeah, I'll open it for questions now. And I would request, I would ask my team to share the links of all the webinars. You would find it on zeeve.io as well, our website, in the blog section. But I'll ask our team to publish it as well again on all possible social channels. So do get to our Twitter channel, LinkedIn channel, and also that you keep getting all these notifications in time. All right. So thank you everyone for joining in today. Have a wonderful week ahead, and we'll talk next month again with the next episode of the series.